Cool. All right. So you see some welcoming messages in the chat there. So what this event will look like is we'll start with some introductions. Since we have a relatively small group, we can all go around and introduce ourselves. And then we'll jump into highlighting some of the resources that we updated on Public Lab, on air quality, and have just a handful of slides for that because I really want to turn it over after that to a discussion where we can share our projects, our questions, our ideas, and then talk about getting started with this work together. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, I can begin, but please share your name, your pronouns, where you're calling from, and then maybe something that you're interested in talking or learning about while on this call. And then I'll start and popcorn it over to someone else, and then we can keep passing it around. So my name is Jeanette Lim, and I'm the research coordinator at Public Lab. I'm calling in from Bellingham, Washington. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm just really excited to hear about all the projects that you're working on in air monitoring. So thank you all for coming. And then I'll popcorn it over to Katie.
Hi all, my name is Katie. This is Maggie. I am calling in from Providence, Rhode Island. I am wrapping up an 8-month stint as a community research, community tech fellow at Public Lab working on the bucket monitor. And I'm really excited to hear about, all the other air quality stuff that's been happening. Sorry, I'll send it to Scott.
I'll go next. My name is Ethan McMahon. I'm at U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I'm in Washington, D.C. area. Pronouns are he, him. And I'm just interested in how communities can use this information to take action. So I'm kind of interested in kind of the hardware, software, and the people in action.
Hey, can you hear that? Okay. Hey, my name is Scott Eustace, he, him. I'm in New Orleans with the group Healthy Golf, working with some donated purple airs in Cancer Alley. We've tried a lot of things, mostly there's a Ushahidi effort, just calling the National Response Center, and just, I think we finally got some critical mass to get a lot of different groups interested in air quality monitoring in some of the highest cancer risk areas of the United States. And I'll kick it to Wendy because you're beneath me, Wendy Brower.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Wendy Brower, and I'm in New York City's Lower East Side, and I'm working with Veronica, who's here on the call, and Deborah, who came to the bucket talk the other day. And we've started a community response to the forthcoming, how do you say this, destruction of a 45-acre park. Oh, there's Deborah now. Great. And so we're at the very beginnings, and we're really thinking about the people who live closest to our mostly public housing residents, many of whom who don't have air conditioning, maybe not even fans, and the amount of stuff that's coming at them. So I'll pass it to Veronica so she can say hi too.
Hi, thanks, Wendy. I'm Veronica. I am a PhD student of public environment policy at the New School, and interested in climate policy in relationship to climate resilience and infrastructure. And so, yes, supporting the East River Park Action Group in sort of thinking through how we should monitor the pollution created by the landfilling of the East River Park. And so I'm interested in, as Scott said, and Ethan said, in any software, but also design of a study to monitor air pollution in places like parks. I'll pass it over to Stevie.
Hi, my name is Stevie Lewis. I work with Public Lab as Senior Program Director, and I'm currently based out of Miami, whereas I'm sure you can tell it's a bit warmer outside here maybe than where you're calling in from. I'm just really excited to see everybody on the call today and hear about all the different projects going on in the updated research area. Thanks so much. And oh, I'd love to pass it over to Gus. Great to see you, Gus, or hear from you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Gustavo Aguirre Jr. I am a community organizer, with Central California Environmental Justice Network down here in California's Central Valley. And we've been doing a little bit of community air monitoring here in our valley. We get a lot of agriculture and a lot of oil and gas, and in very close proximity to communities. And so we've been doing that for about 5 years now and have adopted very successfully the Bucket Brigade. I was previously with GCM, Global Community Monitor, and learned a lot from them. Pleasure to be on. And I will popcorn it over to Sema.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sema Hernandez. I am based in the Houston area. I am a staff member at Progressive Coders Network, where we are developing a benzene air monitor project that was that initially came out of a petrochemical disaster here in our Fenceline community. I'm really happy to be here and to learn from each and every one of you on how to have a better air quality monitoring system where we currently don't have one. Thank you for allowing me to be here. Oh, and I'm sorry. Who hasn't gone yet? Jackie?
Hi, my name is Jackie James, and I'm in Tonawanda, New York. It's outside of Buffalo in Western New York. And we had worked back, gosh, a long time ago, probably back in 2003 with Denny Larson in GCM. And we worked with the Bucket Brigade, and we held a local foundry Coke plant called Tonawanda Coke Corporation accountable. And it's a long story, but we won back our right for clean air. We held them accountable, and they ended up closing their doors 2 years ago. And we have a 97% reduction in benzene in our community, and we're all breathing easier now. And I'm here to, Jeanette asked me to be here today. So hopefully I can give some pointers about what we did to all of you. Thanks. I give it to, who hasn't gone yet? Deborah?
Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah Mills. I'm part of the Lower East Side Breathe group, citizen activist here in New York City. And wow, Jackie and others, we're so grateful to be here with you guys and learn how you helped push back and gain accountability. We're still trying like mad to stop the destruction of our beautiful park. It's kind of crazy to think that your own government is about to spend $1.5 billion to destroy what is an active public good and will result in a cascade of incredibly terrible environmental and health outcomes. But it looks like the project is beginning, and so we're just trying to hold their feet to the fire and while we're fighting to stop the project in the midst of a pandemic where we're, you know, it just makes no sense. But anyway, we're eager to share and very much to learn and get the same kind of outcomes that Jackie just mentioned. That would be great. And I'll pass it on to whoever has not spoken yet. Thank you.
Michelle, if you're available, would you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties, but Can everyone hear me? Okay, hi, my name is Mashal. I am an environmental scientist, community organizer based out of Houston, have been working with SEMA, but have been on a bit of a hiatus since a lot of other life events were happening this year. But also really interested to connect with more people nationally to understand how to do localized community air monitoring. And SEMA's mentioned the project that we've been working on together, and then there's other local projects. And personally, I'm also interested in understanding how we can pair it up with air filtering simultaneously, because I think that air monitoring is also, yes, very much needed, but in the I just had a lot of seasonal allergies, which is something that I purchased an air filter, and that's changed my day-to-day life. So I'm also really interested in supplementing the narrative with simultaneous air filtration to be supplied to community members as well. And really looking forward to figuring out how to do that, working with youth locally through this collective called Houston Climate Movement. We have a climate justice and youth engagement section, and I've been really actively engaging with city and county officials to get a climate justice, regional, local climate justice program going. So really, really happy to be here and really happy to learn from all y'all doing incredible work. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ashley McCall Powell. I am the community manager at Public Lab, and I'm supporting Jeanette today on this event. And really am glad to see a couple of our fellows from the fall here. So thanks, Michelle and Sama, for sharing a little bit more about the work that you're doing to everyone else. And it's great to meet everybody. I'm calling in, like Jeanette, from the upper left part of the United States in Washington State, and closer to the city of Tacoma if you want to look me up on a map. All right, Alana.
Thanks, Ashley. Hi, everyone. My name's Alana Moore. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in from New Orleans, Louisiana today. I am the kit fulfillment coordinator at Public Lab, and I'll bounce it over to Mimi.
Hi, y'all. I hope you can hear me. I'm having a bit of connectivity issues this morning, but my name is Mimi. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in from New Orleans, Louisiana. Today, I'm actually really interested in learning a little bit more about indoor air quality. I too ended up purchasing an air filter in the last 6 months and have noticed like differences in like my simple air sensor and those types of bits. So yeah, wondering what kind of things, might be coming from the outside in or, from the inside out here in my home. And am I last? Is there anyone else to popcorn to? Oh, hi, head on.
Hi, Ruth Wedanjo, she, her pronouns. I'm from Kenya. It's a small country in Africa. I'm part of the Public Lab open source developers. I'm working on the redesign of the dashboard. So I just wanted to learn more about different groups within that are using Public Lab and see what they're up to and learn from them. Yeah, that's all. Nice to meet all of you.
Welcome, thank you. And then we had one more. Cindy, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. If you want to introduce yourself, feel free to do so. We've been going around and sharing where we're calling from and our pronouns and what we're interested in learning about or talking about on this call. So feel free to take yourself off mute if you'd like to share.
Hi, everyone. I kind of joined in last minute upon the advice of my advisor. I'm an incoming PhD student over in Dallas, Texas at Southern Methodist University studying applied science. And I'm really interested in learning more about Public Labs, the things that you're doing for air quality, because I'm a part of a grassroots organization in Dallas too that participates in air quality monitoring. We're called Downwinders at Risk. So I just want to hear more about what's going on.
Great, thanks so much. And thank you everyone for the introductions and being here on the call. Lots of great things I think we can talk about. I think it's going to be a really good discussion. Before jumping into that, I wanted to briefly share some of those resources on air quality that we've been updating at Public Lab, so we can see what sort of resources are available here. And then hopefully that can also help frame and support the discussion that we're going to have later. So I'm going to share my screen for a bit. It's going to be 10 minutes max because I really do want to keep the rest of the time for the discussion amongst the group. So I will share my screen here. Alrighty. So we are talking about air quality being a pretty large topic. We focused our review this time on sort of like the getting started in community air monitoring steps. So over the last couple months, we've been reviewing our air quality resources at Public Lab and refreshing them with the goal of making it easier for people to answer the questions they have about their communities air. So this involved some online research, conversations with air quality researchers, community members, organizers who all contributed ideas and questions that sort of revealed what's going on in community air monitoring at the present. So I'm going to show a super brief highlight reel from that review. So we can see what's new on Public Lab and also what sort of key questions and themes rose up during that review. So on Public Lab, where you're going to see the latest resources and posts and community conversation is on our tag page. So this is where you'll find research notes, questions, any Wikipedia pages, and the people on Public Lab who are talking about air quality. So the URL is at the top there, and we can share all of these links later as well. The air quality wiki page is something that anybody can contribute to, and it's really the home base for our air quality content. So it's got more background information and more context, some of that connective tissue that ties a lot of those posts and community conversation together. But it's also got the background on those conversations at Public Lab. So this is how we sort of put it all together. And one of the things you'll see on that Wikipedia page when you go down, so I've just taken screenshots here, but you'll find one of the themes that did bubble up during this review is the question of how do you even find out what's in your air? So, if it's not already clear, if you're not already sure based on smells, based on what you know about what's nearby, how do you find out what can be measured in your local air? So we've started a place for resources on using publicly available air databases and tools to find out what polluting sources are nearby and what emissions there are. Going down that rabbit hole, there's just so many, and then it would be great if we could kind of figure out a way to use them more effectively. I know Marshall, who's on the call, has some ideas about this as well. One of the benefits of this, depending on your study goals, you might be able to use publicly available data alone to answer your questions before, or at least refining any community air monitoring approaches. And then the caveat with these databases being that the data needs to actually be reported by the facilities in the first place that are emitting. And then also any monitors that are out there measuring things need to be turned on. And that's not always a given, as we know from many communities around the world. Another theme that came up a lot in this review is low-cost air sensors. So amid an explosion in more accessible sensor technology and cheaper sensors, so what are the kinds of things that we can do with these lower cost sensors? Some uses that came up is that you can use several of these lower cost sensors at different locations in a community, help you compare air quality in different areas, as a way sort of to screen or choose a site for more expensive and precise monitoring following up. You can also potentially understand how these sensors work. The simple air sensor, which is the image on the right there with the LEDs. So this is a particulate matter sensor from Public Lab. It's a pretty bare bone sensor that lets you examine how it works. So this is the same kind of sensor that's in the purple air monitor, for instance. And we have an activity on Public Lab explaining that. There are a lot of sensors out there determining the levels of different pollutants, and their accuracy will vary, it looks like, depending a lot on the pollutant being measured. With another sort of trade-off being that, you know, the more data you get, it means you also need more resources to manage that data. So we have a lot more discussion about that on the Public Lab website. And then finally, the third theme that seemed to come up a lot, and I heard mentioned on this call already, people being interested, this is advocating with air quality data. So you have data, you've collected it yourself, or you've gone to public databases to get it. So what can you do with it to advocate for healthier air? And we know we're going to hear some stories from folks on the call who've done exactly that. But how can we kind of make this more systematic? So we need some like defined mechanisms for community source data to be used by government agencies, and that it doesn't require you to collect like regulatory level data for that. So for instance, some of that more accessible sensor technology, how can it be used to direct further action from agencies? Last week from the on the Bucket Monitor Open Hour that Public Lab hosted, we heard powerful stories on how communities are using this air sampling tool, this analog air sampling tool, to create policy changes. And then, like I mentioned on this call, we're going to hear from some other people who've effectively used community source data for advocacy. So we're going to jump into that, but there's more conversation to be had on Public Lab as well. So following along with this, there's a lot more material than I've just really kind of zoomed through here. There's a good dialogue on our website about air quality, so I encourage you to visit publiclab.org/air quality and jump into the conversation. I want to turn it over now to a discussion. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And we want to start talking with you all about your community air monitoring projects. And then we might touch on some of these themes that were brought up. And it sounds like we will, absolutely, with advocacy, and also what kind of tools are available out there. So yeah, I want to kick it over to the discussion, and Michelle and Sema, if I could put you on the spot. So you were both recently fellows at Public Lab, and then now are working on some of the projects that you brought up. So would you like to share more of what you're up to, and then maybe some of the questions that you're working on now?
Sema, would you like to go first and talk about the air monitoring project with ProgCode, or would you want me to start?
Well, you are the scientist. So
No, I feel like you've been spearheading all of the effort with the ITC fire, so I kind of want you to give that background. And I don't know where the project currently is right now, so I think that there's a lot of really good updates that you can share.
All right. Well, it's been a process. It's been a difficult process to just get to this point where we've been developing the hardware, and we're trying to build a cohesive package that is low cost for communities to monitor benzene in the air, especially along the fence line communities. How this came about was during the ITC fire, where a lot of environmental justice community activists and advocacy people got together to organize around the issue of the fire, misinformation, and not having enough air monitors. Marshall and I were a few of the people that were involved in the community organizing. And what we realized is that there wasn't enough information for our communities to make a decision about what to do. And we knew that sheltering in place wasn't enough, and there wasn't enough protocols or any protocols in our community to address major petrochemical disasters. And the most basic information that we at least expected was accurate monitoring of the air. When the benzene levels peaked was when the benzene levels were taken offline. And we were told that it was for maintenance. However, maintenance records show that it had been recently calibrated before the refinery explosion happened here. So since then, that took place March 17th, 2019 in Deer Park, Texas. We've been developing hardware to monitor benzene in the air. And like I said, that's taken a process because it's a matter of not just finding the right type of sensor, but also figuring out what other needs in the community are besides benzene. So we have other refineries here that also are releasing hydrogen cyanide. So it's a matter of, can we switch out the sensors? Can we add sensors? Is the enclosure going to be, big enough to hold the sensors? And then what does that data mean? And then how do we deliver that information to people in real time with accurate data? So we have been developing the hardware. We are in the testing phase, and we already have an app that reads the data. Right now, we don't know what that data means until we get that data over to our scientists that are on this project. One of them is Marshall. So Marshall, I kick it to you.
Thanks so much, Sema. Yeah, so basically that's been the background of us trying to figure out how to do more community awareness in real time, especially in the times of disaster, and how we can build this type of technology to share with our communities. So where we are right now, also building off of those conversations, I've just been having conversations with other people in community members like environmental lawyers, like, if we do collect this data, is this something that we can use to litigate, or is this something that then becomes an advocacy tool? So I think that those are conversations that we can also have, because that's not my area of knowledge. I definitely want to know, like, if we have, say, 1,000 air monitors right next to a refinery and there's an explosion, we have data that we collect that shows spikes in, say, benzene or some other class A carcinogen. How do we utilize that data to effectively bring about change in our environment? So also having that kind of at the background, I've been thinking, like, well, there also needs to be, I see that there's so many incredible people, but I also feel like there could be some type of simple step-by-step guide to understand what our environment is when we, say, move to a city like Houston, Texas, or somewhere in Central California or something. How do we identify what's in our environment? How do we collect the data? Who do we connect with to be able to collect the data? Then how do we analyze the data? So I feel like if we could have like a step-by-step guidance document or a pool of resources that we could put together, from air monitoring to water and soil, because I'm also working with communities in Fifth Ward and Kashmir Gardens, which is the northeast part of Houston. And they have a significant, probably one of the largest cancer clusters that's been identified. And they're dealing with creosote contamination. So that groundwater that they've been living, I guess the site has been a Union Pacific rail yard, has contaminated the groundwater since the 80s. And while the site isn't active, there's residents that have been exposed since maybe the 60s and 70s, but also they're sitting on top of a groundwater plume that is high proportion of creosote. So there's really high levels of cancer. So how do we kind of, and cleanup isn't really the easiest thing when it comes to groundwater remediation. So if you have like soil that's contaminated and groundwater that's contaminated, how do the communities in real time either relocate or advocate or things like that? So I'm trying to think of like ways that we can put together resource documents to get people also the training that they need And I know that there's some professors and there's some interest with a professor in Texas Southern University to get leadership training. So I'm also wanting to discuss the possibility of doing some type of and community-wide leadership trainings for residents to be able to, you know, have workshop style information to get to be able to understand all of this stuff that it took me like a decade to learn, and I still don't think I've scratched the surface. So thinking about those things as well. So that's where I am in Houston right now. And like I mentioned, I did that. Sorry, Sema. Like I mentioned, I put an air filter because I live right next to a paper plant, and I always smell sulfur. So I just put an air filter in, and that's kind of changed my entire day. So I really want to also advocate for communities to be able to afford and have access to air filters and things like that, so that they can change their quality of life in there as soon as possible, while they continue to advocate for clean air and clean water. Sorry, Summer, you were going to say something?
Well, this entire experience, I think I can say, has been a learning curve for all of us, that we're not fully aware of the lack of preparedness that our county had for that type of explosion, that type of fire. We learned that a lot of the refineries here don't have enough equipment to turn off an industrial or petrochemical fire for 3 days. They only have it for literally like 24 hours. Resources were being taken from other cities, other municipalities to turn off the fire. And while all this was happening, they all told us everything is fine. Your children should go to school, while there is a dark plume of smoke over our heads, and then ash is falling from the sky and debris is falling from the sky. All of these have real consequences that we still don't know what effect it will have on us, on our children, on their children. This is something that we need to be on top of, and developing a protocol to address these issues has always been a baseline personally for me. When there was an issue of going to the doctor, going to the hospital, people were really afraid to go to the hospital or doctor because a lot of our community does not have adequate health insurance or health insurance at all to cover those costs. And a lot of our community is undocumented. So even when you go to the hospital itself, they don't have any protocols to test for any kind of toxic chemical exposure during those disasters. And I'd like to see that change in the future, hopefully soon. But I do see some progress coming from the county, but that would have not happened if our organizing didn't initiate that type of action, that type of change in our community and from our elected officials.
Thanks, Sema and Michelle, for sharing that. I wonder if anyone else who's on the call wants to sort of address some of the questions that came up. So questions about the sensors and what do the data mean? I don't know if anyone's got anything for input there. We can also circle back on some of those things and then hop over to the Lower East Side Breathe folks, who sound like you're also in sort of beginning stages of your community air monitoring project.
Yes, and it's really confusing. We have a very limited budget, and there's different kinds of sensors. But as Veronica asked, is there a database that compares them? And we know there's fixed and mobile. We have our park is over 2 miles long, where this construction is happening. There's a freeway there already, a bridge. So there's a lot of other pollutants in the area, and it's been difficult to get baseline, which is what we need to do now before, so we can compare. But if there's such a thing as a comparing something that really compares them in use, That would be very handy for us. And then we've also started looking at the question of many people are not online, but could we use, there is, mandated air testing there. Could there be policy that says this, anything at a construction site needs to go to a publicly accessible map or even a weather app, because there's so many weather apps now that include air quality and automatically would alert people. I don't know. I don't know if Deborah or Veronica wants to add to that.
Yeah, I think one of the major problems that we are envisioning is how to get information to people in a way that it's easy for both people who have a phone, a mobile phone, and for people who don't. So we started thinking also about more analog ways, just by, for instance, setting up sort of having people putting some flags in people's buildings when the air is not good. I mean, we're expecting probably large fluctuations on air pollution, depending on where the construction is located, depending on wind. So we're just trying to think about like a combined set of strategies, which could be both non-fixed monitoring of air pollution, maybe doing the same route every day through the park and around the area where the construction will be, because it will shift. It's going to be in some place in over a few months, and then it will shift to other parts because they're closing the parking sections. And then perhaps, but then the issue we have is how do you, I mean, some apps like Airbnb allow you to see automatically the level of air pollution on the air casting map. The problem is, how do you get that information to people's phones? They would all have to download the app. So I think we should probably do something that is, there's some training required, right? But that also is something that we think should be done, but requires some level of, it's a different level of participation as well. So I don't know, I would be particularly interested in learning from people who have set up designs to monitor air pollution. So, I mean, I suppose it needs to be, it needs to be quite rigorous. And so if anyone has ideas about, what they're doing it more fixed, or have it as part of a route every couple of days, visiting the same places. I mean, it would be great to hear how people have been thinking about this. And just two other things, Wendy mentioned that she's also been thinking about furnace filters, to put furnace filters on windows. So any experience with that would be great. And also the use of photo voice, so as a way to engage public and sort of going through the park as they walk through the park. And there's all sorts of detouring now happening, and so we thought that would also be a good idea to sort of get people to share how they feel about the construction work and whether they feel any difference in the air.
And I just want to jump in and say the city, and we've been going to meetings for 2 years about how this is all going to work and how do we protect ourselves from the inevitable particulate matter. And we don't know what's in that park. It was built by Robert Moses back in, this was the late 50s, I think, or we don't know what what is it called when you build, you're building there wasn't land there before, so the highway and our park became landfill. We don't know what's in there, and we have a huge Con Ed plant. So we don't even know what they're going to be kicking up in the dirt. We don't know. They're planning to after they bulldoze the entire park and the 1,000 mature trees and the entire ecosystem, they're going to be dumping 8 feet of landfill from we don't know where. All of this to say the city from the beginning has, when we objected to just the very idea, they said, oh, well, people would just be able to shut their windows. Well, once they knock the trees down, we already get these extreme heat events. Our neighbors in public housing suffer worse than, you know, they suffer tremendously, more than most. And they don't have, a lot of them don't have air conditioners, and most of us can't afford to run our air conditioners. So that idea of shut your windows and you'll be protected from the dirt that we'll be kicking up is insane. So I would love to learn more about these life-changing, you know, air filters that you guys personally have been using, and start trying to think about what are some inexpensive ones that we can talk to the community, and hopefully maybe we could even get the city to, or some government agency to provide those air filters. But any idea about brand or model, or and then Wendy had a friend who's used the furnace filters in their windows. So a combination of those things, some of those, as Veronica said, some of those analog solutions, while we're monitoring what's going on, if we can also just kind of help people learn how to keep the filth out of their apartments, and that's not going to be easy.
So we're really at the beginning, but it's 28,000 people who live in NYCHA housing that are officially supposed to be affected by this construction project, and 110,000 residents in total. So it's really quite a number of people. I'm actually started to ask the question to candidates coming in, can we make air filter monitors on construction sites public, you know, as a way under open data laws? Is there a way to extend to that? So there's so many different aspects of this project that we're just starting on, and we've been, I'm sorry, I'm going to dash in a second, but I'm really glad Deborah and Veronica can stay. But wonderful to meet you all. Thank you all for your hard work too. The more I get into this, the more I realize how important this invisible thing that supports us all is really is. So thank you, and I'll see you later.
Thanks so much, Wendy. Katie, I saw that you had put your hand up there. Is there something you wanted to share?
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask the folks, Seema and Michelle, are you connected to Airlines Houston? Are they part of your network?
Yeah, I think definitely in touch with airlines. They do some great work, and I think that they've been really advocating. I think last week they did a community bike ride where people took air monitors and rode around the city to map the air. So they do incredible work, and they're working with I think purple air monitors and a couple of other monitors now to get that out to the communities. And I've asked Harrison, who's with Airlines, to help me set up an air monitor in my neighborhood. But yeah, they're definitely a great resource also in the Houston area.
Yeah, no,
and they've been working with the city and county as well to get these to the forefront. Sorry, what were you gonna say, Katie?
So I think one of the things we spoke with them and kind of looked extensively at their resources as part of the Bucket Monitor project. I found their posted documentation to be just incredibly useful, because the Bucket Monitor is a very old project, and most of what we did with this was to just kind of collect a lot. We didn't create anything new for the Bucket Monitor project. We just collected resources and collected stories. one of the kind of outcomes was to cast a pretty wide net on what air quality resources exist for setting up community monitoring studies specifically. A lot of that came out of GCM, and a lot of that came out of other groups who've done work since then. Some of which is on Public Lab, some of which is not. But I'm personally really interested in the benzene monitoring piece specifically, and also would broadly be interested in talking with you all about just looking at the scope of resources that currently exist. I found that there was just a ton of stuff out there, but a lot of it is not super visible and hard to find unless you're specifically looking for it. So that's a thing I'd be interested in.
Yeah, well, I also do want to say that Air Alliance was invited to participate in this project. We sent them links and emails at the beginning of the project, and they never responded.
Yeah, I feel that in Louisiana, we have so many needs and disasters going on. We get a lot of phone calls that, we at Healthy Gulf, like ostensibly we work from Corpus to Tampa, but we can't respond to like everything. We've recently begun to just do particulate monitoring because an advocacy piece, there's a lot more science behind particulate, and EPA has models connecting it to economic impacts and lost days of work. So in the past, we worked with Denny and others to monitor that because it was pretty simple and it didn't burn people out. Whereas sometimes we get into air monitoring projects and people, it's a lot of work for community members. And if you don't see results for like 6 years, because your pathway to change is like a litigation effort, people are going to get burned out and stop reporting, stop working on it, because it's a lot of work. It's just a lot of work. So I wouldn't give up on Air Alliance, although I guess I'm interested in talking about how do we keep people from burning out, especially like in Louisiana, our path forward is not usually through the government, it's through litigation. So you're talking about a 6-year turnaround when the needs are very urgent about, it's things that people are breathing like right now. So I appreciate the comments on like the need for tips on filtration, because you set up, I'm setting up purple airs in people's homes, and while we're setting it up, it's like going off, right? It's like, what do you do when like you get an alarm 3 times a week? It becomes really distressing to the point where if you're asking people to journal every time the meter rises above a certain threshold, you're asking people for a lot of work. So I guess we're struggling with that, I guess, because initially we were doing odor reporting and people just stopped, and people were doing like really good odor logs and reporting to the National Response Center and LDQ. But after, about a year of like not much happening, people kind of tailed off. So I do think all of these efforts are really hard. I think one of the mitigation efforts we've come to in the water arena is asking FEMA, like, and after a disaster, the plant goes off and the water is bad and people don't want to be drinking the water. Can we build distribution of water filters into rural communities, or air filters into the communities the same way, we truck bottled water? The money is there for bottled water distribution. Could we put water filters or air filter distribution into that FEMA response? And that's something we've been talking about as part of the Disaster Justice Network. So that was a little bit rambly, but I really appreciate y'all from Houston talking your struggles, because I think we have a lot of similar ones in Louisiana.
Thanks, Scott, for telling us about that. I'm also appreciating too this theme coming up with like remediation needs being immediate as well. So this is something we can keep working on too. Realizing we're about 8 minutes away from the top of the hour, and Jackie, you've been dropping some really good advice in the chat here. I was wondering if you want to take a few minutes to elaborate, and then I want to make sure we hop over to Gus as well, who's got lots of experience organizing in Kern County in California.
Yeah, so I can't remember. I was writing a lot of notes. I can't remember who spoke when, but it was near the beginning of the conversation. The team of people that were dealing with, I think they were in Texas. They were working with the community. So my thoughts were to cultivate the relationships with both the community and the flip side of that, local scientists that will be your champions. So, I don't know, what the relationship is with the community that you're working with, but they really should decide on what the question is that they want answered and their goals. What are the goals? And to, really draw them in and like get them focused on something, because here in Tonawanda, we had 53 air regulated facilities. So we had so much going on, and we really had to like draw the line in the sand and say, okay, what is the worst polluter here? And like just really hone in on that industry. So, and then on the flip side of that, I would suggest, are there any local scientists, like maybe from a university? We partnered with our local state agency, the New York State DEC, and there was an engineer there that we could really trust. It's, building that relationship of trust. What we did with the bucket is we use that as a screening tool. So that what I love about the bucket is that data that you get from the bucket, our state agency, relied on that data. So it was only like a couple of samples, but that was really reliable data that they used. So that was my thought. There was a lot of other things happening, so I don't know if there's any specific questions. Any other questions?
Thanks so much, Jackie. I think we can also try to take some of this onto the public lab Q&A if there's more to continue there. But Gus, if you would mind sharing some of your work out of Kern County, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, everyone. And what I will do, I realize that sometimes we're a little spoiled here in California with some of the stuff that our folks do. And so I'm sure everyone has seen it, but if not, I'm linking the AQ spec. It's a South Coast air quality management, a kind of evaluation of air sensors, low cost air sensors, both in the field and in the lab. And so we've been able to use this to kind of validate some of the findings and some of the reasoning behind our community-based air monitoring projects. But like I said, I started very early on with, I had the privilege of working with the late and great Denny Larson and Jessica Hendricks, who were great teachers of mine. I was with them for about 9 months, and in those 9 months, I was just exposed to so much great stuff. And out of that, we were able to do ad hoc kind of GCM kind of project here at the current organization I'm in at Central California Environmental Justice Network. And we use a spectrum of community science where you would raise a question and you would go through the things, and then, hopefully something positive would come out. And we've been able to change policy here in the community of Arvin, which is a small farm worker community here in the central southern basin of the San Joaquin Valley. And the buckets were something that really kind of made that possible. We started with pollution logs. Folks were able to register what they see, what they smell, what they feel, right? Allergies, they would see smoke, they would smell rotten eggs. And then we would deploy using all this weeks and months of pollution logs, would look at trends, right? We would see like, all right, so in the evenings, this is when everyone's doing pollution logs, or in late mornings is when folks are doing pollution logs. And so we use bucket samples to kind of give us indicators of like, there's a potential leak here, right? And we were looking at oil and gas emissions. And so, you got your VOCs, and we were able to detect leaky pipelines underneath the ground near homes, to a point where the local legislator said there's tons and tons of like these 2-3 inch pipelines, and we regulate only 4 inches and above, right? And so that needs to change. And because of this deployment of community scientists and community research, we were able to take this small little nuisance in the community of like, constantly smelling petrochemical odors, to say, all right, we've had enough of this. We got to change, we got to look into the regulations. And the bucket samples and the order logs that we used were very efficient in what the reasoning behind why we needed to change these laws, right? And then we took it one step further and went into AQ spec and looked at what are the monitors that are available to us at this at a community organization that we could deploy that give us better indication. And so we use PM monitors, we use some methane monitors, and we started at the bottom, right? Just like all of us. And now we're literally influencing multi-million-dollar air monitoring projects that the local government, the local air pollution control district is deploying, right? So before we were agitators, right? We were just like, hey, you got to do this. Now we're influencers. We're really shaping the policy. We're shaping how these community air monitoring networks are being talked about, and the importance of looking at these small scale micro communities as relevant as these large metropolitan areas, right? One life is not more important than the other. And so we use that in our efforts, and they've been very successful. I've had the pleasure of working with Public Lab for quite a few years now. And we work a lot with youth. So when we mention Public Lab and we go to their resources, the balloon mapping, the kits, well, we do a lot, like literally every other month we have Bucket Brigade mapping or creation of these buckets, right? We sit down with youth, we have a youth academy, and we sit down with them and we literally build them from scratch. And so they've been able to really have this sense of ownership of these projects, right? Like, I'm part of this, I'm doing the collection, I'm working with these scientists who evaluate these data sets and then give us kind of basic information then to use that for advocacy efforts, right? So they've been very successful. It has not been easy at all, finding with government, even in spoiled California. It's here where I'm at, it's very industry friendly. And so that's what been one of my greatest takeaways, that this ability to shape the narrative and really come from a space of knowledge, of consensus, and say, we're not just rambling off stuff, right? We have this information that could back up the advocacy. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gus. It's incredible, really, what you've been able to do from the ground up with like really influential California legislation as well that you were contributing to, I know. We're at the top of the hour, so I just wanted to acknowledge that and then mention, if you need to drop off, please do. I can stay on for a little bit longer. We'll keep the line open. Just wanted to say thank you so much for everyone who's been joining, for those who need to hop off. If you want to continue following along, please go to Public Lab, sign up, and ask your questions, post your answers. There's a quick form here I'm going to drop in the chat. If you want to get updates, you can submit your email there. So we'll collect emails. We can email you directly. We're also going to post recording of this call on Public Lab, along with all the links that were shared in the chat. So we'll have them all in one spot and they'll be publicly available. So yeah, we can keep talking. If whoever wants to hang on the call, if you need to drop off, then thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you again. We'll keep talking.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Gus. Good to see you. Thanks, Scott.
Janet, I clicked on the link that you put in for the forms and it says
yeah.
that I need permission.
Oh dear. Let me fix
Jeanette, this happened to me during the fellowship. Sorry, everybody.
No worries. Here, I'll fix that right up. In the meantime, does anyone have any other questions or things we want to talk about while we're still on the call?
I would love to, if you all have time to kind of hear more about kind of what the benzene sensors and what you're doing with those, kind of how you expect to use them. Are you hoping to use them to supplement to supplement existing sensors that, or do those just not exist, or are they not on?
There is no existing sensors in the area that are controlled by the community or by our local government. It is my understanding, and maybe this has changed since I was notified of this, but Air Alliance did provide free, simple, regular, air monitors, which was great. But our local city council and mayor rejected the free monitors. So we're up against a system that doesn't want to be held accountable or responsible or have any oversight. So that's been difficult just to even get free monitors. So what we're doing is developing the sensors, the hardware for it. It'll be with the Wi-Fi connection and a solar panel that perpetually is powered, and it's streaming data into a, I guess, repository or open system that people can have access to it in real time in map and crowdsourcing information as much as possible. So that's kind of been what's happening with the benzene air monitors, and what we would like to do ideally in the future is to have different sensors for different communities for their types of pollutants that are in their area.
Great.
If that answers your question.
Yeah, and I sorry, can I just add, I also wanted to add, Katie, I think it's going to be really great to just get like more, from my perspective, like learn more about the bucket monitor project, which I'll definitely look into the resources that you've provided and everyone else has shared. But like also like with the ITC, well, just TCEQ, which is the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality, they have monitors, but they're, at this point, I think that that's kind of well understood that they're also like few and far between, considering that there's so many refineries in the Deer Park, Pasadena, Baytown area. Like you have, if you have 3 or 4 monitors, I think that that's the biggest issue, is like that they're not enough. And the issue with benzene is that it is challenging to collect benzene data as a community air monitor, because I think benzene it requires, I mean, once you start doing benzene monitoring, I think it's just kind of expensive to find. Low quality monitors is also, to keep the cost low, I think is the big challenge, right, for a lot of the monitors. And if you can design something that, I think there's really good PM monitors, kind of like the Purple Air monitor and like the other monitors that I've been seeing on the Public Lab website, but to be able to identify like the class A carcinogens, I guess, that are around in the ship channel area, and then how do we collect that for the community. And I know, I think it was EDF that did a really good, like they used Google cars to drive around in the east end and the ship channel to collect data, and that Rice University was working with them on that project. And those are really high quality monitors, like but that data takes almost like a year to analyze and things like that. So we were in contact with a professor at Rice, and I have to actually follow up with him on that. But he connected me to a couple of people that help develop technology for low quality air sensors, or low cost, sorry, not low quality. But that's the challenge, right? Like the quality of data is also really a significant part of it. So I think that there's multiple things that need to be considered. So yeah, just more context on the background of that.
I have follow-up questions, but it looks like, Deborah, you unmuted yourself, so.
I just wanted to ask very quickly, and this could be by email too. I wanted to ask Mashal which air filter you were using at home. I think 2 people mentioned that they had gotten air filters for themselves at home and that it really kind of changed their lives. And I would just love to find out make and model and just sort of like look into that and start doing some comparisons out there. And I also wanted to ask Seema, what were the free air monitors that you had proposed to your governor and your mayor that got rejected? Is there something out there that we should be looking into for our project that maybe we could make the same kind of ask? Although I think we get, I don't know, our representatives sound just about as representative as yours, but in terms of accountability.
Yeah, well, just to be clear, it wasn't I, it was Air Alliance that went to our city council and mayor to get air monitors in within our city limits, but they rejected it.
All right.
So my thing, and I think it was purple air monitors. And so my thinking is, instead of going through the bureaucratic red tape, I think it's, crowdsourcing and asking community members to volunteer to put this up. I think that's the route that's
the direction we're going. So thank you. Thank you.
That's the way we're going as well with ours.
Katie, I know you shared, could I get their email address so that I can reach out to them and ask Gwen Ottinger?
Yeah, Gwen Ottinger. She's great.
I was going to send you an email, so maybe we can kind of just share all those resources and keep chatting about that. Like if you could share those resources with me, then that would be awesome. And to answer your question, Deborah, about the air filter that I put, I can send you the link for that as well. It's just I found it on Amazon, a Honeywell HEPA filter.
Okay.
So I think that, I don't know if it's, and then it has like this like button that you can toggle go all the way up to allergen level. So the allergen level works for me. So I don't know if it's like mold or if it's like my inside air quality is worse than outside. Things like that.
Thanks.
But I think, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I don't know what I was going to say. Sorry.
Sorry about that. It's Ashley. I was just going to say, Mimi, I think dropped a line, but she also mentioned using, I think, an indoor filter. Is that what you were asking about, Deborah?
Yes.
Yeah. Her response was, I use a simple air filter, and I also use HEPA, so HEPA filters indoors. So those is what she said for her response.
Thank you. Can you throw that into the chat so that I can just collect that later? Is that okay?
Ashley says yes. I also wanted to jump back to one more, back to the benzene. It occurred to me also there's a group out of Carnegie Mellon University, the CREATE Lab, who I know they've been developing sensors that capture TVOC. So that would include benzene. It wouldn't hone in on benzene, but they are working with not like super low cost, but lower cost sensors. And they're not like freely available yet, but they're like, if you contact us, then we can work with you. And they are concentrated in the Pittsburgh area, but they are moving out and working with communities elsewhere as well. So that's another potential one to look at.
Yeah, my impression is that for folks who use the bucket monitor, that benzene is like one of the #1 things that it is used to monitor. So just for context, the bucket is kind of like a catch-all. Basically, you just take a grab sample and then you can specify to whatever, you send it off to a lab and you can specify what you want them to test for. Obviously, you can also do like targeted testing of specific chemicals, different tools. But one of the things that that in the course of talking to folks who had used that tool that I heard over and over and over and over again is that one of the problems for monitoring benzene specifically is that there is no regulatory mechanism for seeing, identifying, or responding to spike pollution events, because I think it's a 24-hour average standard. And like I talked to public health folks who were just like, I mean, I talked to people in like community members. I talked to folks who like, you know, like the even if like there's not right now, even with the recent updates to the Clean Air Act, I think, which include like they like capture a higher level of benzene. There's not like a legal mechanism to do anything about spike pollution events, or even like capture, like even if you capture that data, it's one of the, my impression is that it's one of the ways that folks who are advocating on benzene specifically kind of get shut down. And it, I mean, those are highly, highly toxic events. So that's a thing. And there are some folks that I had connected with who are looking at that from a public health standpoint, because basically the way that you can see it is like through body burden, which is like a horrifying, awful way to like record health data. But yeah, that's I mean, it's true of a lot of, it's true of a lot of hazardous air pollutants, obviously, but with benzene specifically, like that was just a very frequently identified problem. And Gwen has done some work on that. I would totally encourage you to talk to her, and I can connect you to other folks too. But that's a thing that I have a lot of interest in.
No, I do as well. And Marshall did mention that there are some air monitors out here by the TCEQ. And I do believe that our county emergency response system or management system has invested a lot of money into these vehicles that have a lab inside the vehicle to test the air, the water, the soil. But sometimes those are deployed because the EPA has only a certain amount that it could spare depending on the disaster. And those are deployed sometimes hours after a disaster has been reported. So that allows that 24-hour period to become shorter and shorter to actually analyze the air. And it does take a human body to metabolize benzene within 24 hours, depending on the exposure. And because this is a petrochemical industry area and it's about 12 miles of refineries on either side and processing and pipelines, this is an area, much like a lot of other areas around the country, that is exposed or has benzene exposure on a daily basis. So that's kind of why, we thought about focusing on benzene specifically because it is such a toxic, carcinogenic, volatile organic compound that occurs naturally, but in concentrated areas, we're exposed to them daily.
Great. Yeah, I would love to connect with one of the things that I would love to do kind of as a follow-up to just the general documentation that we've done on the bucket monitor is I would love to pull together some resources specifically on benzene poisoning and all of the factors that kind of go into that, because I had been under the impression that factories are required to monitor it, and facilities are required to monitor it. I know it's not a criteria pollutant, but yeah, it's a thing that has come up a lot, but the bucket project is mostly a tool documentation project, so it's come up in kind of a peripheral way.
I think that might depend on the regulatory board of each state. If I'm not mistaken, I mean, I don't know how every other state operates, but Texas is way different.
I believe it's a chemical that all the facilities need to report to the TRI. But how they do that monitoring is, I'm not sure, probably different.
Yeah, Gwen had 3 research associates working with her over the summer through Fairtech Collective, and I think 2 of them were working on specifically on benzene. So yeah, anyway, we should talk. I'd love to connect up afterwards.
I just sent you an email, Katie, so we can chat more about it, and really happy to connect to discuss. And yeah, I think that when I did research in Manchester, when I was a master's student, there's this, the EPA was passing a refinery sector rule, and the exceedance levels for, I guess for Texas, what Texas considers acceptable is definitely different than, for benzene is definitely different than states like California. So that was one of the things that we put in the public comment period, and like a lot of what the conversation was around there. So I think that that's definitely one of the big challenges as well. And all the issues that you mentioned, like when there is an emergency, refineries can make all sorts of exceedances, and that is okay. So
Marshall, just a quick question. There is an issue brief your group posted on this topic. That's right? On Public Lab?
yes, Sema posted something about Sema made a post about it, and then I was wanting to kind of just build off of that,
Yeah.
but sort of keep something separate about like
I'm
a
just
resource
thinking of,
document. Mhm.
absolutely. As you know, the conversations and ideas that you have together with Katie, I mean, Katie's documentation around the bucket is up on Public Lab as well, but I'd love to see some follow-up happen on that research note if there are next steps or things that could be crossed between the two, just so that we can see the pathway of thought that people have between the topics and the tools.
Yes, that would be amazing.
Deborah, are you getting off? Okay. It's nice to see you.
Thanks so much, Deborah. Thanks everyone
Nice
for joining.
meeting you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, I think I also have to hop off, but thank you so much to everyone for organizing this, and I'm really looking forward to chatting with everyone more.
Well,
yes. Really grateful for you all being here and sharing. And then, yeah, really also, like Stevie said, looking forward to seeing this play out on Public Lab so we can keep sharing these resources. So thank you so much again for all joining, and then we'll keep chatting.
Yes, thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
All right, thank you. Bye.